It is the third day of May 2023. Dana Durnford. Welcome to the crazy world of nuclear. We got a great one for everybody tonight. Get ready. It always takes me a minute to get the crazy show ready. Because you're talking about nuclear. Because you're talking about nuclear. I was looking for the volume to that. Couldn't find it. Now we're paying the price for it. That's okay. Let's get this show off the road. And in the second gear. Let's make it happen, Dana. Alrighty, so we're going to talk, we got a poll tonight for everybody. Should Britain apologize to the victims of Australia for nuking them? They nuked their wildlife, their water, their land, the air, the islands, the future. And I think it's only appropriate. In fact, they were asked to foot the bill for cleaning. Of course, that was a total whitewash. Britain shared the bill to clean up after multiple nuclear detonations, 12 nuclear weapons, 12, and 700 conventional dirty bombs. And we'll cover a lot of that, actually. Aboriginal groups are likely to demand an extra $45 million for 400 square kilometers of land they can no longer use. $45 million. You can't buy 400 square kilometers of land for $45 million, rather, can you? Of course not. In 1985, a whitewash Royal Commission in Australia found that cleaning up Maralinga would cost as much as $600 million. You can't clean it up, unfortunately. You can't reclaim it from the water tables, from the plants, from the cities that were irradiated. Britain should bear the brunt of the cost, the Commission said, and the British government rejected it. Of course they should. They should never went there and done it. So what happened was Britain, nuclear industry, always the coward, went all the way to Australia to do their nuclear weapons. So that's a war. It's the same bomb, the same radioactive fallout. And I'll just walk you through it coming up in a little bit. So Britain should bear the brunt. Yeah, well, you went to another country and contaminated the land, the sea, the air, the water, forever. And so at least give them an apology. At least say, yeah, well, we're scumbags back then. We're sorry. Fukushima disaster magna. First we're going to cover Fukushima because everybody's complaining I don't cover it no more. Come on, Dana, cover some Fukushima for God's sakes. And you're right, I heard you. So just start off with some typical brainwashing throughout Japan. The Nuclear Man by DC Comics in the United States, The Nuclear Man. Is it the Hulk, Dana? No, that's another nuclear ploy. Is it Spider-Man? No, that's another nuclear ploy. Kids play with reactor toy sets. And we've seen this back in the 60s or 50s or something too, by the way. Yeah, what are you going to do? It's nuclear. That's how they roll. Photo smiling mascot asks Fukushima kids to gargle to stay safe from nuclear radioactive fallout in a nuclear wasteland. And radioactive sparkles on happy children. That's pretty sinister to say, you know, to equate the fallout with sparkles. A grinning bird mascot is enlisted to teach the Japanese children in Fukushima how to stay safe from the radiation that escaped the nuclear meltdown, aka crippled nuclear power plant. The economists on the positive side of Fukushima. What, there's a positive side? Kids just need to gargle after being outside. In Japan, something that the children mostly do anyway. A lot of parents kept them indoors for at least 2 years. They could only go to school, and then they weren't allowed to go outdoors even then. Alice in Wonderland was used to convince children in Japan nuclear power is safe. Alice in Wonderland. So when you start looking at it, theme park, nuclear theme park for children. Character sings the nuclear is very safe, efficient, and good for you. And the photographer, of course, is chased away. Fukushima's superhero tells kids the arch enemy's bad reputation from nuclear crisis and fights against fools and sloppy people. Fools and sloppy people. This is the confirmed nuclear wasteland. The white was zones they opened last year, and the yellow is what they're opening in 2023. And those communities are Tomoka, Kuma, Fudabar, Nami, Minnesota, Katsuru, Lydiat, and the always revolting Dr. Jekyll, Robert Hayes, come out a few hours ago with this little doozy.
Well, here's some big news for you. 6 municipalities around Fukushima have been released back to the public. The residents can go back there and live again. Imagine that. Pretty cool, huh?
I don't know how he ever got off his meds, but he did. I left a comment for him. It says, how do people complain to the university that a atomic plague like you comes from? Oh, never mind, I figured it out. What a revolting thing to do, right? You come out, this is his version. Now, he's a professor that teaches nuclear at a university. And he's quite the plague on the internet, I notice, with propaganda. Almost every day you'll find his propaganda videos. 35.8% of Fukushima children have thyroid cysts and Knowles tumors. So the thyroid tumors we're talking about are 2 centimeters. The thyroid gland is 3 centimeters by 5 centimeters. So the tumor is almost the entire size of the thyroid gland. Daughter has so many thyroid cysts, the doctor told can't count them all. The hospital told not to test children. And Hayes. So Kuma, by the way, which is what he was talking about, is just a couple of kilometers away from these critters, these death machines. Fukushima Daiichi worker believed the country would be evacuated if the number 4 spent fuel pool collapsed, and that there should be hundreds or thousands of people working furiously every day. Well, he built these contraptions off-site, brought them in and laid them on top of the carcasses of the original reactors and pretended everything was normal. And they got a whole bunch of crazies like that one right there out there claiming that it is. Well, if it was, you wouldn't need to do the stuff they're doing, obviously, right? Plutonium-239 dispersal, North America. That's models from... There's another model of plutonium-239 dispersal. Reports from the IRSN, the French government, of 1 million to 10 million times the previous weapons fallout, so-called numbers after Fukushima, of cesium-137. They produced another study at the same time. This is based on the first 16 to 25 days or something. So you're at day 20 right there. So it takes 20 days to cover your planet in radioactive fallout. And then we got the confirmation of it. 20 million particles of iodine-131 per liter, 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 in Canada. Top government officials, Fukushima nuclear report was so shocking we decided to treat it as if it didn't exist. Workers confirmed TEPCO is taking the weekends off. Well, that's not true. They ran away, right? Weekends off. No, not one plant worker could be seen. Operational equipment laid idle, a cold, eerie silence. The next month, half of Japan to be covered in nuclear waste. 60 and older should be prepared to die at your power plant. Weekends off, not one plant worker could be seen. And Tokyo Vice Governor suggested a Fukushima draft. Get all the young, or in their case, over 55, to go to the nuclear meltdowns. Fukushima tapes from 3/11. It's time to make a geezer suicide squad. Concerns rising. 16,000 workers ran away. 16,000 workers ran away. Even 200 miles away in Tokyo, you're at 500 trillion becquerels of kilograms. These are unconscionable numbers, by the way. High concentrations of hot particles in the Pacific Northwest after April and May, including plutonium, americium. I actually showed you those models at the beginning. Unprecedented spike of sulfur from spraying it on the hot reactor cores. The sulfur becomes like this little spherical balls that can ingest the hot particles and carry them. They're super hot particles all of a sudden because of the sulfur peroxide, hydrogen, buckyballs effect. The bottom model is April the 7th. That's less than a month later, the whole planet closed. And they refuse to admit, even though they acknowledge, but they refuse to acknowledge, but they do acknowledge that that's reactor 3 blown up, but they refuse to acknowledge that it blew up. It's confusing. Maybe I'll explain that a bit better coming up. Fukushima's released so great aerosols from radiation in Washington were 100,000 times normal. And in Seattle, right alongside of it, the data from radiation in the Seattle area survey may be withheld by the feds for national security purposes. This is NOAA's model of 40 days. So when the model winds out, that'll be 40 days of radioactive fallout. Currently, you're almost at 20 days. You're at 20 days after the tsunami. You got to go all the way. This is the day, 20 days from explosion. So all of them have exploded by this day. So the plume is just starting to come out, and you can see what it was like before all the plume was out. Another study from the United States of xenon-133 at 450,000 times above detection levels. This is another model from a different institution, by the way, of the xenon. Killing babies. Is iodine killing babies in Philadelphia? Well, if it ain't, plutonium-239 probably is. 11 becquerels a kilogram. These numbers, and you've seen 1 million to 10 million becquerels a square meter landing in a previous study. So, but 11 becquerels of it is enough to cause holes in the children's heart. At 50, it's irreversible heart damage. At 50 becquerels a kilogram for adults, it starts off with permanent lesions on your organs and it goes downhill from there. Radiation levels spiked to over 1 million times normal after Fukushima of the cesium to 10 million becquerels per square meter. That's France's study. Xenon study we showed you. Radioactive iodine levels in America exceeded contaminated permitted levels. Radiation precautions for areas near Seattle, Vancouver, Portland. Perhaps you need to wash your shoes. You know who washes their shoes all the time? Cats, dogs, and animals. And children in many senses. Where they're really close to the ground, they're always hands all over their boots when they're taking them off. And the species all lick their feet, see? And insects and everything else. And this was guaranteed to cause the breaking of the food chain. Another study shown 360 atoms sequestered in just the testicles of males. It's a bizarre study, by the way. And these are hot particles. You only need one to end up with some kind of disease down the road of the 1800, besides cancer, that you are vulnerable to from this stuff. It's the duty of the scientific community to reduce the public's fear and anxiety. That was Geraldine Thomas from the United Kingdom. It's an absurd statement, by the way. The very opposite of why we would have scientists, isn't it? The very lowest levels of radiation are harmful to life. We got to think the exposures from nuclear plants. And with the study last year of the neutrinos, or a couple of weeks ago from the neutrinos in Canada, you can sense them 150 miles away and 1.25 mile deep in the rocks from the nuclear power plant. You were able to sense just absurd amount of them. That's a signature you don't want to be living within. So if it can go that far and through that distance, then it can travel thousands of miles in a basically whatever line it wants to. The rocks can't stop it. 12 million yen to censor Twitter, which was at the time was about $65,000 for people that were talking on Twitter. They did a study on Twitter, and it was they traced all the tweets back to, which was like 100 million or something, of the top ones, the most prolific tweets, back to 5 tweeters, 5 different people were the influencers. Everybody else retweeted it all over the place and spread out from there. The governments and universities should never have access to data like that under any circumstances. New York Times got a legacy of just being degenerate, eh? Wow. Has worked vigilantly, TEPCO has worked vigilantly to close out close scrutiny of the ravaged plant's condition. We struggled for the first couple of years to identify the buildings and the site, and there was 1,900 pictures released originally. A lot of them were shit pictures, but I've actually done redone the presentations on them a number of times over the years, and the current version is in my playlist. UN chairman studying Fukushima wouldn't affect to see health effects in children and workers or anybody else. What an incredible statement from the UN, eh? Around-the-clock monitoring of blogs on nuclear power. They're funding projects to monitor online info about Fukushima. Can you imagine? They're all vying to, trying to keep their jobs. They got no one to pick on. Well, besides just me and you, but they got nobody else to pick on, just a few dozen people. Japan Times column as the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time. The truth will come out about Fukushima. Fukushima is the most serious man-made disaster in human history. Obesity rates have doubled. An excess of weight gain after a nuclear crisis is a marker of radiation brain damage. Radiation, like explosions going off in the cells, blowing holes in the DNA, so they explode at the speed of light in every direction. And they wreck all the cells and chromosomes and DNA. And they do this exploding every second. So your body has to fix all the cells and all the chromosomes and all the DNA every second. It can't do that. So it ends up flooding that whole area, and it's attacking the source at the same time. But it has to flood that whole area forever, for the rest of your life. And if it gets into your bones, it also, like children, it'll mutate your stem cells. and it gets into their thyroid gland, so they end up with radioactive hormones. And applied all of this to all species, and apply all of this to wherever the nuclear, it could be Canada, it could be United States, it could be wherever a nuclear meltdown has happened, right? You're going to see the same attributes. Maps showing Fukushima fallout, the United States radiation doses in the northeast and the Great Lakes is equal to the west coast. The west coast equal to the elbow connected to the, I was going to say shin bone, that would have been pretty bad. It's pretty sad. The bottom right-hand corner is 19 days of radioactive fallout. Massive radioactive releases of Fukushima going on for 3 years. That model is 19 days. That went on for 3 years straight. And actually, it's never stopped, obviously, right? Think about this statement here. Doomsday-like radiation releases. If a fire in the pool at Unit 4, it would be a global catastrophe. Let's have a look at the Unit 4. Hopefully, keep your fingers crossed. I don't see no fire. You see a fire? I don't see no fire. It's totally normal to me. Just a sarcasm for anybody that's not familiar. Don't worry, you'll get it. Top government official, Fukushima nuke report was so shocking, we decided to treat it like it didn't exist. Well, not all of you. Arnie Gunderson
Unit 4.
Unit 4, so he's... Now, I put those two pictures there. Now, he made the assemblies for the fuel pools, for the racks. He made the racks for the assemblies where the fuel rods are sitting in the assemblies in the fuel pool for 70 different reactors. And he doesn't know the building looks like this, apparently. This is the great Arnie Gunderson and Maggie Gunderson, who was a pro-nuclear spokesperson for over 20 years.
It has always been my biggest concern. If you watched our website, on the very first week of the accident, I was saying that if Unit 4 were to catch fire, you'd have to evacuate Tokyo.
So you should evacuate Tokyo. All of eastern Japan evacuated. Fukushima was abandoned. Well, it didn't matter if you abandoned it or not. It's all gone. In other words, all of eastern Japan should have been abandoned. Ambassador Murata writes to the UN Secretary General that it's no exaggeration to say that the fate of Japan and the entire world depend on number 4 reactor. And the entire world, the fate of the entire world depends on number 4. Well, let's have a look. I got my fingers crossed. Oh, it's not looking good at all. Oh my goodness. Wait, is that reactor 4? Because the fuel pools were at the top of it. Let's hope Dana's wrong. Number 4 reactor. Now, remember Yale, I was looking for the headline, couldn't find it for some reason. And the Yale professor says, if the fuel rods at reactor 4 touches, it'd be a crisis for 100 or for 1,000 years on Earth. Well, the fuel pools were at the top, and they were at the top, but they're not at the top no more. I don't know where they're gone. They're definitely not at the top. So reactor 4, the fuel pools were at the top of the building. There is no top to the building, right? They built this contraption off-site, and the idea of that is to convince you. So this kind of sums it up here. If we do nothing, even Tokyo could become off-limited. Well, they done this. They sent their pictures, look, RT. They sent their pictures, videos, where the journalist claims they're at the top of reactor 4, up in that fuel pool above it, looking down on it. You got to be up above the pool to look down on it, and the reactor is at the top of the pool. And so that's what they've done. On the worldwide media, done the same thing. A lot of them pretended that the journalists and the media's claimed they were actually on top of the building that didn't exist. So we may not be able to live in Japan someday. So that's not a power plant, that's a planet killer. And Bashkut Tunjab. There's two of me. What is that? Don't worry, I'll get it right. I'm going to play a little clip from a Bashkut Tunjab.
His name is Mr. Bashkut Tunjak.
Earlier this morning, the mandate issued a press release on the situation in Fukushima, and this is one of the cases that's mentioned in the report. In the press release, we're urging the Japanese authorities to halt the relocation of children and women of reproductive age to areas of Fukushima that exceed levels of radiation that were considered safe before the nuclear disaster. After the nuclear disaster, the government of Japan raised the acceptable level of exposure from 1 millisievert per year to 20 millisieverts per year. And we're quite concerned, in particular for the health and well-being of children who may be raised or born in Fukushima.
So he's suggesting people shouldn't move back into the nuclear wasteland because they're crazies. As the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, think of that statement, global catastrophe from Unit 2 would make Tokyo uninhabitable. This is the most dreaded scenario. If that reactor goes like this, reactor 4, or like reactor 3, if that happens, so if that reactor blows up and catches fire like reactor 4 and reactor 3 done, you'd have to abandon Tokyo. Wait a second. Reactor 3 was a worse reactor. That was a mixed oxide fuel reactor. You don't suppose you should abandon Tokyo with 36 million people in the metropolitan Tokyo, do you? Nah. Mom, Dana's fear-mongering. Anonymous U.S. government nuclear expert. Fukushima radiation levels were astronomical. Nothing containing the release of radioactivity. Well, let's check. No, there's nothing there. Monitors detected 100,000 sieverts an hour because everybody else ran away. Massive explosion of Fukushima Reactor 3 fueled with plutonium. U.S. government's worst case scenario, likely a reality. The entire nuclear core ejected into the environment. Huh? Where was the reactor core, Dana? It was at the top of the building. How high was the building? 190 feet, you say? Yeah. Former TEPCO employee, plutonium, uranium in reactor 3 have been blown out. It's no ordinary explosion. The government is concealing the truth. Plutonium, potential global catastrophe from reactor 2, though. Let's worry about reactor 2. Let's forget about all the meltdowns. That's just technical talk. Deliberate cover-up. The British government worked with the nuclear companies on the public relation campaigns to downplay Fukushima. The British, which is what we're going to talk about in a minute, if we ever get there. So the plume is April the 7th. That's less than a month. It has covered the whole planet from every model, by the way. And we got dozens and dozens of models. TEPCO done nothing for 2 years to stop the highly radioactive water from hemorrhaging into the Pacific Ocean. Water was above a sievert per hour per liter, we were assuming. Amidst work had not been done to this day because of the difficulties. Well, you know, a gallon of it is a lethal dose. The hoses are not thick enough to shield you. The tanks are not thick enough to shield you. Another one, water with a sievert per hour dose rate was leaking directly into the ocean. Gee, I wonder how water radioactive activity got out of a perfect building like that. How does that happen? I can't imagine how anything got out of that building. Here's Australia, ABC, Cecilia Vega, part of the White House press. Whatever you want to call that bizarre circus.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool.
Now, look how high she is above the pool. Look how high she is above the pool of reactor 3. Where's reactor 3? That's okay. Well, the reactor 3 is the same as reactor 4. The fuel pool is high, is at the top of the 190-foot building. So there's no way she can be at the top of the pool. Look at her, she's looking down on the pool. Fukushima, by the way, you can't even get close to the stacks, let alone the pools that are not there. Fukushima Unit 1 and 2 exhaust stack, high radiation dose rates, had measures of 10 sieverts per hour, but they were maxed out. By the way, let's see what the experts like Helen Caldicott got to say about reactor 4. We can count on Helen Caldicott, can't we? The patriot.
Let me ask you this. You've said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate your family from Boston. Do you think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there? And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
Jeez. Do you have it? Can't argue with someone like that. That Dr. Helen Caldicott, Dana. You can't argue with Dr. Helen Caldicott. You photoshopped that picture, Dana, tell the truth. I might have done it in my sleep, you never know. Hey, can we trust Arnie Gunnarsson? He's the media got him everywhere. Maybe we can trust Arnie.
Unit 4 was damaged twice. It was damaged by all of the earthquakes that occurred, and it was also damaged by a series of explosions over the first week or two of the accident. So the building is structurally weakened. Now, Tokyo Electric's acknowledged that. They went in May and June of.
So he says they went into the reactor meltdown, reactor 4, and put structural supports under the fuel pool. But do you remember where the fuel pool was to?
Last year. This is more than a year ago.
So the fuel pools are at the top in those red depictions. Reactor 4 is to your left.
And put an enormous number of extra structural supports directly under the fuel pool to keep the bottom of the pool from breaking through. You're gonna lie, might as well go big, Ernie. That's pretty big. He made the racks.
The division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
Now, I got him put where the fuel pool is supposed to be. That's the same thing here. He's at... I got his video, Fear Winds, is in where the fuel pool is supposed to be. And look how good my equipment is. I can zoom all the way out in that pool, except when I got to there. If I had stayed on that picture, it would have been perfect. Look at that. The pool never moves. How good is that, man? I should have pulled it after, I suppose, when I got to here, but I knew we were getting back to that. I was getting a bit slack. Let's see what the great David Suzuki got to say.
3 out of the 4 plants were destroyed in the earthquake and in the tsunami. The 4th one has been so badly damaged that the fear is if there's another earthquake of a 7 or above, that building will go, and then all hell breaks loose. I have seen a paper which says that if, in fact, the fourth plant goes under an earthquake and those rods are exposed, it's bye-bye Japan, and everybody on the west coast of North America should evacuate. Now, if that isn't terrifying, I don't know what.
If that's not terrifying, I don't know what is. They tried to spray water on the reactors.
Good evening, this is NHK's Newswatch 9 for Friday, May 20th. On the seventh day after the March 11th quake, self-defense forces sprayed water on the nuclear power reactor in Fukushima. The images were broadcast throughout the world. The Fukushima Daiichi plant was no longer able to cool down its reactors and was facing a potential meltdown. Today we talked with the actual crew that was working to cool the plant. It's the first time details of the operation are being released to the public. J Village is the base for workers trying to restore the power plant. On May
You can't restore the power plant because the building is wrecked, right? But to claim that you were dropping water on it, wait now, let me go back. Right, they're nowhere near close to it. Look, the water dissipates. They gave up after the first day. The radiation levels were too high. 600 pilots died. But the media, they got their little video and then they turned it into propaganda. They'll sacrifice thousands of people to get that little video clip so they can come out forever with the propaganda, see? I'm worried about pressure forcing up water through the cracks in the ground because the reactors typically need 4,500 tons a minute. A minute. Now they're claiming they're cooling all the melted reactor cores with 120 tons a day. It doesn't work that way. These are melted down to 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. They are turning ground into quicksand at Fukushima, and they worry that the reactors may topple. I'll show you a chameleon. This is Madison Hilly from Environmental Progress. Almost looks like a normal person until you see her smile. I apologize for doing that to everybody without a warning in advance. But like, if you're going to dress up and try to win a Halloween costume, man, I wonder who her parents are, or what they are, actually. My goodness, we're here. We finally got here. Sir Mark Oil Plant, Archival Collection, Oli Plant or something. Archive Collection is now online. He was Australian Academics of Science collection of papers belonging to one of the 20th century's most influential physicists being digitized as part of an ongoing collaborative project with the National Library of Australia. And he worked with the British nuclear industry to hide the disaster of the nuclear testing and the 700 plus dirty bombs they set off in Australia. Britain used to wait for the wind to blow across Australia before it set off their nuclear weapons. Should the UK apologize for nuking Australia and all of its wildlife, food, water, land, air, islands in the future? Somebody, of course, the pro-nuclear said no. We don't apologize to nobody. We're scum till the day we die. Woo! That's a little bit hot. That's a little bit hot. That's a little wee bit hot. Australia academics. Professor Sir Mark is perhaps best known for his pioneering research in the nuclear physics at Cambridge in the 1930s. And he had a role in the development of atomic weapons and his remarkable contribution to the World War II era radar research. They were brutal on all the species, those suckers. So his well-documented 1954 objection to electing Sydney-based Professor Harry Messel to the fellowship, which can be traced to his fear that Messel would hand over research into the atomic energy to private industry, and kept him from any recognition by organization until 2014, when Messel was awarded the Academy Medal for contribution to Australia's science. He turned out to be a scumbag too. It depicts a fascinating seg of Australia's science and politics in the 50s and 60s. No, they didn't want to release anything because he didn't want his family and friends and peers to know he was an actual monster. That's why he stopped it. So from 52 to 63, the British government, with the permission of the Australian government and Professor Sir, which is a British title, right? In a British colony known as Australia. From 1952, we're a British colony too, by the way, in Canada. The Australian government conducted a series of nuclear weapons development tests in Australia. The testing occurred at Maralinga, South Australia, Montebello Islands, which a study last year, they discovered it was too radioactive to be there in those 200 islands. And so the tourists, it's a big tourist stop, had changed their policies, and now you're only allowed to bring the gullible tourists out there for an hour. So you don't get too big of a dose in a nuclear wasteland. It's the strangest statement imaginable. Western Australia, Emmon Field, South Australia. So you got South Australia, Western Australia, oh, and that's right, all of Australia. So some basic information, nuclear weapons tests in Australia. They conducted 12 major tests between 52 and 57 when the Montebello Islands, that was the test for Montebello, the hurricane, 25 kilotons, 15 kilotons on May the 16th. 60 tons, the whole one created the sulfur, of course. Emmon Field, they had 2 tower tests. And Maralinga, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tests. Tower, ground level, airdrop, tower, balloon. Some serious radioactive fallout from each of these. Over a decade, a series of minor trials, there were 700 of them, occurred testing components of the atomic and hydrogen bombs. These were dirty bombs. I'm just going to run you through these. So 55 was 13.8 kilograms of uranium wrapped up, this was 235, wrapped up in conventional, all of these are wrapped in conventional explosives. And then these are dirty bombs. So 13.8 kilograms in the number 2, 1955, the Naya 3. 13.8 kilograms as a dirty bomb. Man, go big or don't go at all, I guess. Same thing with 1955 was 5 kilograms. In 55, 57, they'd done 120 kilograms. In 56 and 60, on 6,605 kilograms. There's over 700 nuclear, that they emit to anyway, 700 dirty bombs. So 6,600 kilograms. Like the Hiroshima bomb was only 10 kilograms or so. So divide 10 and, so that's 600 Hiroshima bombs and dirty bombs, for instance. Another uranium was 151 kilograms. Conventional explosives, what they're talking about. I mean, that's insane, 6,605 kilograms. That's insidious. And so I'm just focusing on the uranium. The last one we done was 151 at the top. 23 kilograms, 67 kilograms. They were nailing these things all over the place. 28 kilograms, 25 kilograms. And the other ones, they got plutonium and beryllium, but we're looking for plutonium. Don't get me wrong, the rest is nasty too, right? I'm not going to go through everyone, that's all. And 61s, these are, because we're talking about plutonium, it's a significant amount. It's a significant dirty bomb. So I had a pound up there, pound right there, quarter pound, hard cases, eh? Measurements, so when studies were done later, measurements of radioactive radionuclides, 239, 240 plutonium, 137 cesium in the creeks and soil. There's a lot of studies, and a lot of them were blaming global fallout instead of United Kingdom. Transfers of radionuclides from soil to selected tropical plants on the Indian subcontinent. I'm not sure where that ended up in there. My apologies. Or that one. Who knows with Dana? I guess so much that slipped in there. Australia, 236 uranium, 239, 240 plutonium. I think they blamed this from global fallout. Dirty academics say. The record fallout of 239 plutonium-40 at the World Heritage Bathurst Harbour, Tasmania, Australia. A record of fallout from 239 were lower than the global average. So the academic is doesn't really exist anymore. 239, their job is now to cover up for the industry, right? 239 plutonium fallout across continental Australia. And they're blaming that on atmospheric nuclear weapons testing instead of the British. And I just showed you numbers from Britain. They can't find any of that. You're talking about in one go over a short period was over 6,000 kilograms of uranium, but they can't find any uranium in these studies. Or 236 hard cases. Measurements in the fallout of nuclides in the creek sediment, Sydney Basin, Australia. Remediation of the sites contaminated by nuclear weapons testing. This is where we want to get to in a bit. Nuclear power is clean and safe to General Electric Research, and they're a public relation firm, right? Nuclear electricity is even safer than solar or wind. Every time I see a lot of those studies, that's how they pay their mortgage, by lying, not by telling the truth. There's no money in being honest, obviously. It's only in telling lies. Plutonium, uranium contamination in soils from former nuclear weapons test site in Australia. Plutonium, uranium contamination in soil. I get all these, my apologies, substantially below global fallout average. And a lot of studies, that's what they were trying to do, and they were making that the point of the study. Weapons test site. With local fallout being deposited up to several thousand kilometers downwind of the nuclear test site in Australia, 7,000 kilometers of land has to be contaminated for it to show up several thousand kilometers away. Part of the weapons development program, the United Kingdom carried out 12 atmospheric nuclear weapons testing, 700 large dirty bombs. The majority, 7 of them were performed at the Maralinga test site, and that area is selected to undertake several hundred safety trials involving the burning and explosive dispersal of plutonium, uranium, and other radionuclides. It's just stunning. Britain purposely contaminated the entire country. That's what they were up to. It wasn't so much to test as it was to contaminate the entire country, all the drinking water, all the land. And we know some of those tests, in Adelaide, 1,800 kilometers away, was at 90,000 counts per minute the next day. These are huge numbers. So that major city is permanently contaminated and everybody in it. And all the species. It really bothers me. Several hundred safety trials involving the burning explosive dispersal of plutonium, uranium. It's around 700 they admit to, because we've been covering this for years. As a consequence, approximately 22 kilograms was dispersed at Taranaki during 12 single-point safety trials. Yeah, there was 6,000 kilograms in one short period, too. So 22 kilograms is 48 pounds. But as you've seen on the numbers earlier, right? 48 pounds, if you do it in grams, it's 22,000 grams. And if you multiply that by 85 curies per gram, it's 1.8 million curies just in 22 kilograms, one shot, right? And so a curie is 37 billion atoms, which is an absurd number when you multiply it by curies, right? So it's 1.8 million times 37 billion curies. So 69 million billion curies, or atoms, rather. Sydney, Australia Government Defence Position Nuclear Test Veterans, of course they do. The Australian 2001 produced evidence for compensation. They've been denied because you want to study them, right? You want to they want the radiation to run its course. That's what they're up to. Australian nuclear test veterans produce evidence. The world's dilemma, which the sun never sets, nuclear waste management. This is a stunning story I'm going to show you about Australia. The sun never sets is appropriate. First Nation rights, colonizing practices by the nuclear industry in Australian battleground for environmental justice even all these years later. Should Britain at least apologize for what they done? That's a poll for everybody tonight. Should you attempted remediation of the site began in 1995? It took 5 years. It'll take you at least 500 years to actually clean up 50% of it. Cost Australia $106 lousy million. And the site was returned to the victims in 2009 and is now the site of a flourishing tourism disease factory. Disposal of large volumes, and so I'll show you what they've done for $106 million. Disposal of large volumes of low activity waste compared to fuel rods which are lethal dosed instantly. This will kill you later. Nuclear is not generally accepted by the general public. That's a revelation, isn't it? Several hundred minor trials. It was 700 dirty bombs. Never you mind their minor trial propaganda. Atomic blast site was not the significant hazard. The dirty bombs were. Contamination from the dirty bombs was the problem. Oh, baby, was it a problem, too. Taranaki site was the worst contaminated area. 22 kilograms of plutonium, uranium-235, americium-241. So why didn't they mention americium-241 earlier? Because it decays to plutonium-241. Waste from Maralinga. So what they done was 400,000, we'll get to it, now 400,000 tons in just one, of just soil. They dug a hole and just dumped it in it. Partial cleanup carried out in 67, Operation Brumby. Highly contaminated areas were buried in shallow pits. Other areas were plowed into the ground to reduce the contamination. These are maniacs, man. Holy, eh? Low levels compared to nuclear fuel of plutonium. There's no such thing as a low level of plutonium. Plutonium is brutally dangerous. Contamination was left on the surface. An unknown inventory of waste was buried in 22 shallow pits. Yeah, we put something in the pits, but the Geiger counters were screaming. We don't know what it was. They were temporary workers probably anyway. Disposal requirements set by the Royal Commission of British Nuclear Tests in Australia. The test sites to be cleaned up to be fit for unrestricted use for $100 million. There's a fantasy and a half. About 2.15 square kilometers of plutonium contaminated soil needed to be removed. 120 square kilometers of lightly contaminated area. They done that for a few dozen $1 million. That's a pretty neat trick. Other pits were exhumed and buried in deeper trenches. Were exhumed. Other pits, holes in the grounds, right? So every time it rains, it just loads up the water tables. You see over here, we'll get to it in a second. Waste from Maralinga, the trenches, or big trenches, this actual picture. One spot was 460,000, think of 460,000 pickup trucks. 460,000 cubic meters, 2,000-pound bags of soil were scraped and buried. But they're just talking close by to some of the nuclear explosions. They're not talking about. And then they had a minimum of 15 feet of clean soil above the contaminated soil. That was their solution. Sadistic creatures. Don't need no deep geological repositories for the Australians. Just don't turn your back on them. They'll put it in your garden if you're not paying attention. Waste from Maralinga, this is their version of dealing with it. Of course, today they want to go a mile underground and a mile offshore and bury it in special containers. Australia just dug another hole and stuck it down there and have a nice day, get back there and build your houses. This was kind of interesting where, so to use vitrification right where it was 2 in situ by running electric currents through the pits at temperatures of 1,600 to 2,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures or Celsius. And the technology, the electrocution, trial by fire. So apparently this is the vitrification where they just turn it into a large chunk. Imagine the emissions from that sucker. The person you see there is holding out their hand with a Geiger counter, I would imagine, in their hand, pointing it at this. You get a lethal dose probably just walking past this. It was suspended after 11 pits because it was killing everybody that was walking by it later. The remainder of the pits were exhumed and the contents buried on site in purpose-built holes in the ground, aka trenches. So now they're claiming permanent occupancy are well below the 1 millisievert limit, which is 1,000 microsieverts. These are mad people. But anyway, let's tell the story. The dose will remain approximately the same in the future. Plutonium may migrate deeper into the soil in the future. It'll get sucked up by the roots of every plant that grows, and the pollen will float away, the radioactive pollen. At the time the contamination occurred, the land was considered worthless and uninhabitable to them. It was natives' land. Waste from Hunter Hill. There was the mill, right? The radium ore and stuff like that. And so these are houses built on the old radioactive wastelands. $1 million houses. Thank goodness. Radiation's only like a banana. They'd all be in trouble, right? Every time I hear the word banana, I get upset. There's nothing I can do about it. Soil relocated by adjacent properties for landscaping, claiming that it's predominantly uranium-238. Well, this was from the milling, the tailings and stuff like that. But it was concentrated, see? And there was chemicals used to filter it out. We see so many examples of this over the year. This is not an accident. You can read between the lines later if you like. Total yield 600,000 kilotons worldwide. The total yield from the nuclear weapons detonations was 181 kilotons, right? But hang on, bear with me. Let's revisit that for a second. Not so fast, slow down the pony. Bear with me. Hang on. So they had, let's go 6,200 kilograms of dirty bombs just in that 1 year period. Divide that by 15. Let's say 30 pounds per Nagasaki or Hiroshima. Let's blow it out of proportion. So that was equal to 200 Hiroshima bombs of uranium-235. Just in that one period that they used as dirty bombs, right? The same amount of fuel was used as Hiroshima and Nagasaki type bombs. But that's because I'm doubling everything, including Dana. Dana, stop doubling yourself, getting dizzy. I hear you. But by the way, that's equal to 40,000 worldwide, would be equal to 40,000 Hiroshima bombs. So it's not 2,200 nuclear weapons, it's 40,000 nuclear weapons of weapons, right? When you count all the hydrogen bombs and you add it all up. Australia 3-year-olds are being targeted with having psychiatric disorders such as sleeping with a light on was considered something wrong with the child. And by the way, in Australia, it's illegal for the children to watch TV until they're 4 years old because it's so hard on their eyes. The Australian government confirmed radiation clouds over the east coast after Fukushima was 8 times the normal reported radioactive fallout. Japan's secrecy law passes the lower house 2013. Prison for inappropriate reporting. Inappropriate. Official says we're on the path to a fascist state. No, that is a fascist state. Fear of Fukushima cover up to worsen. Oh, it got worse. Protesting the secrecy law is considered an act of terrorism. And Japan government promotes the idea that you're racist if you avoid Fukushima nuclear food, and that the entire process is echoes of George Orwell, and a nuclear activist to be constantly spied upon. Yay! I guess that explains why I got 20 people on my show. I've been doing for over a decade. They got a poll for everybody tonight. Should the UK apologize for nuking Australia and all its wildlife, its food, its water, its land, its air, its islands, its future? Let your fingers do the voting. EDF is bringing North Scotland 50 megawatt batteries. 50,000 homes from a battery. So instead of getting real storage like water batteries where you pump water up a hill and it falls down, or compressed air storage where you just dig a bunch of mine shafts. So if you use the same money for compressed air or mine shaft and you compress air into the mine shaft, so that you would have created probably a gigawatt of power compared to the money they spent on batteries. And it's going to last 50 years instead of 10, right? And you'll be lucky if you get 10 years out of the batteries. That's the way it rolls. Can't have it unless it's garbage. If it's garbage, you can have all you want of it. Zelenskyi postpones energy price pain for Ukrainians, but for how long? Show a picture of him in front of tanks. He destroyed everybody in the country's future. On purpose, no doubt. All for a paycheck. Hard cases, boy. G8 drilling demonstrates new geothermal deep drilling tool. This is a very exciting story. Is there such a thing as an exciting story anymore? It's anything without nuclear. Anything. As long as you got no nuclear. The drilling has conducted the first public demonstration, new deep drilling tool. It developed a tool to materially cut the cost of deep geothermal drilling by doubling the drill speed and extending the drill bit's lifetime in hard and abrasive formations. So this is huge news. They democratized geothermal drilling. Unlocking geothermal anywhere requires new deep drilling technologies. Just imagine if we had a few universities work on it. We'd get rid of all the gas, oil, and coal and disease factories like nuclear power plants and replace it with geothermal. Walk away. Job well done. Good for 50 years. And we can recycle everything. Geothermal energy is the only clean, renewable, reliable baseload energy source. Well said. Here, here. EU co-funded geothermal heating plant is being officially inaugurated. Brit fusion magnets set for U.S. gamma ray bombardment test. Brit fusion magnets. So they're going to wind these things up to 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And then the radiation they're going to create, the gamma shines, the gamma rays, the beta shine, the X-rays, the neutron bombardments, on the magnets, because it's going to be bombarded with the neutrons in particular, and that's going to it's going to break down the material on the atomic level and take away its integrity. So in other words, it kind of becomes brittle. So these high temperatures that they're talking about, I've been playing with this for hardcore for 50 years. They're no closer than they were 50 years ago, but they got nice pensions and retired, and their children are working the same jobs, and they want to keep that chain going. Why they manipulate everybody, put all their hopes into something that won't exist instead of something like geothermal that do exist. And I'm a terrible person for even talking about any of this. I know I get yelled at and attacked and censored and vilified and demonized and smeared constantly. And to work like a dog to try to keep this show going. And I'm just a normal, everyday person. People forget that. I'm just a normal, everyday nobody, and I'm trying to do my little thing, right? Tokamak Energy is off to Albuquerque Desert to douse the kit in radiation. Just such a sad statement. But where specifically in the desert are they doing this, I wonder? Is prepared to test the technology at the U.S. Gamma Ray facility in the desert. Great, another place I didn't know about. The Oxford-based company has developed magnet technology it hopes will be able to withstand electromagnetic bombardment from a fusion reaction. But you don't have one. You have something that you're calling a simulation, but it's not a simulation. You can't quantify it without an actual fusion reactor. Hence the problem with this technology. 50 years and you don't even have one. And the world has to carry this. We have to do with all the precious metals while you guys screw up everything. And because you only hire inbreeds, then the real people that could actually do the job can't get the job. Well, and that's the problem with this industry, the inbreeding, right? And so there's lots of people out there who could probably do breakthroughs on a lot of this technology, but they can't get the job because they're not inbreeds. And the industry, as we know, only hires inbreeds. Withstanding electromagnetic bombardment from a fusion reactor while being capable of holding 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures in the center without it coming in contact with the walls, because if it comes in contact with the walls, it will detonate. If the process is ever to be industrialized, magnets, so they got to have a bunch of meltdowns for it to work. Must also be resistant to powerful gamma ray fusion, which is also X-rays and neutron bombardments and beta rays. Powerful gamma ray fusion reaction emits at the U.S. Department of Energy Sandina Laboratories in Albuquerque. Right, I know I forgot. Sandina, which is 35 square kilometers with staff of 11,500. They got 11,500 staff and 800 students. For every student, they got 12. And just a few wealthy people are funding this ridiculous. The taxpayers are paying for most of it in reality, but they need original investments to get their foot in the door. Tech billionaires have invested heavily in fusion. Sam Alton has sunk $375 million, which is nothing. It's literally nothing. In a nuclear fusion startup, Helion. Gates and Benioff helped fund the Commonwealth Fusion System, and Sun Microsystems co-founder Khosla has backed Realta Fusion, a spin-out from the University of Wisconsin-Madiso. The anonymous coward says, so now we know where Bruce Banner worked. I hate these kind of comments because it's specifically meant to keep Spider-Man and the Hulk in the forefront, right? Peter Parker. So now we know. They're despicable comments as far as I'm concerned. Electricity from solar and wind surpassed coal generations in the first 2 months of 2023. According to the data from the U.S. federal government, solar and wind now provides more electricity in the United States than coal. And they scuttled every attempt at having storage for 20-odd years, 30 years now. When generations by all renewable energy sources considered renewable accounts for 24% of the total generation and outproduce coal by 50%. Electrical production by the mix of renewables surpassed that of nuclear of 21.9%. Wow. And the gaps between initial installed capacity of an electrical generation by renewable energy sources led by wind and solar and those of coal and nuclear are not just growing but accelerating. So renewables are curb stomping disgusting, dirty nuclear. Netflix $2 billion gamble on South Korea and a new Squid Game is an unlikely nuclear deterrent. Monticello tritium leak. This was 10,045 gallon barrels. So it leaked out 3 to 4 months before they announced it. And then when they announced it, then they went and tested the water and said they couldn't find anything when the results came back a few weeks later. But that's because it happened 4 months before. What a dirty, despicable... And then to mention the word tritium and leak, there is no pipes at a nuclear site that leaks tritium, and 400,000 gallons is not a leak, it's a catastrophic event. 30,000 training places announced at Hinkley Point C nuclear power station. 30,000 victims could build this disease factory surrounded by farms and poison people for 60 years. Ghana nuclear power plant to test the sirens yesterday. Kind of late, Dana. I think they had 90 sirens, 96 sirens in a 10-mile radius. That plant could burn right to the ground, and they won't use one of those sirens. Burn it right to the ground. There's zero possibility you hear a peep from any of those sirens. 3 temporarily detained in Mesen for protesting against the nuclear disease factories opening in Turkish. Yeah, the last police in that part of the country you want to get arrested by is Turkey police. Apparently they had some clout, so they got out of jail the same day or something. Temporarily detained 2 anti-nuclear activists, aka humans, like everybody else, and Workers' Party of Turkey parliamentary candidate as they reacted against the delivery of nuclear fuel to Turkey's plant. And Vladimir Putin showed up to celebrate it. Nuclear opponents set out early to protest the ceremony, April 27th. Citizens were repeatedly stopped by law enforcement, and subjected to information checks. Finally, they were stopped by the police just a short distance from the nuclear power plant. And it's not expected to become operational in 2020 or until later this year. It will take until 2026 for the plant to operate at full capacity. It'll take another 3 years. The industry is so good at lying, and everybody just sits there and takes it worldwide. Shocks everybody at these shows, I'm sure. Even when the power plant operates without any accidents, it will still release radioactive dust to the environment. Agricultural products grown likely like strawberries and bananas will be labeled as containing radioactive waste. Well, that's the perfect thing to grow around nuclear plants is bananas, so you can torture everybody, right? And claim it's like potassium. Turkey shelter employees were beating a dog to death using a shovel. That's a great country to have a nuclear power plant in. We done this story. Nuclear waste is misunderstood by the crazies. We're not going to do that again. NATO Cold War mentality seriously endangers global security. Yeah. NATO's the new North Korea, right? In reality. Forget about North Korea, worry about NATO. Oh, God. Canadian politics. Former Trudeau Foundation head says past leadership misled Canadians on the Chinese donations. Canada gave the Chinese a massive amount of land for minerals here in Canada. Just gave it to them. Renewable energy share German power use tops 50% in the first quarter. So Germany was 50% of their electricity came from nuclear or renewables. The whole world's shitting on them because they closed down their nuclear plants recently. What's going on here? That's good. I thought I'd seen a flash of... Because you know how I'll get the yellow when I get a bad connection? Well, I got a wicked connection, but certain streams ends up getting... Because I'm on fiber optics, so it can't be bad. It's consistency. Should UK apologize for nuking Australia and all of its wildlife, food, water, land, air, the islands, and the future? I think so. Let me do the math on this. They set off 700 dirty bombs, waited for the wind to blow across the country before they set off their nuclear weapons. That's the black hole of stupid, right? Jesus. You don't know what's going to come in. Oh no, water. We've done that one, I think. Get back to work. Got you, boss. Thank you very much. On with the show. India's got a youth nuclear society. Freaking demons, eh? No child is safe when it comes to nuclear. Today in Norway, a roundup of the latest news on Friday. I got no idea. I moved on right away. May Day for the Planet and Humanity. Internationalist May the 1st, 2023. Oh, I forgot May the 1st was May Day, right? I guess everybody else did too. Did you know each Trident nuclear submarine carries 300 nuclear weapons? That's disgusting. And you can't use them. All you can do is have an accident and contaminate the planet. Like, you can't use them because you can't cash your checks anymore. They're not going to use it. In January, a 4-star Air Force general told 50,000 troops under his command he expects the U.S. to be at war with China by 2025. Like, I hear this every year my whole life. China does the same thing where they say, the Americans are going to attack you, you got to give us all your power and your freedom or we can't protect you. Conservative activists demand Goldman Sachs investigate investments, fundings, arms of Chinese nuclear weapons and munition companies. Well, Goldman Sachs is a great big stupid Ponzi scheme, right? Nuclear waste shipment travels 16 million miles to a site near Carlsbad amid safety. Yeah, it's vented on the highway. Why do they gotta do this all the time? What's the odds I can find that? Hang on. I'm a sucker for this stuff anyway. What am I looking for anyway? Oh yeah, whip. You're gonna get the whole phone book and vent. Maybe that'll find it. I gotta type in Dana. Vent. Was I smart enough to use the word vent? We'll find out. Woohoo! So this was a seated question at a meeting after 2014 nuclear meltdown, which we covered as it happened and for a week after, straight. So this was a plant in the audience. She's going to ask a question, and it's, unless you know this topic, it's the weirdest question. Nobody is going to ask this question unless you're deeply versed in the nuclear industry. So it's a plant, right?
Are you still getting such waste that's not vented? And
I'm going to play it again. Are you getting waste that's not vented, that is not vented?
are you still getting such waste that's not vented? And that could be a problem.
Okay, so that's a great question. So let me answer it more generally. There are no containers at WIP that are unvented. There is a requirement that all drums, that all containers that come.
Okay, so I got to go back 1 second. She said because, hang on. Are you getting waste that's not vented? Because that's a problem. In other words, it's good if it's vented all the way across the country, and when it gets to WIP, it's vented into the environment. That's what she's saying, see? So the person who doesn't know, they understand these nuances, are like, oh my God, I hope they're venting it, right? But that's the worst thing news imaginable.
And that could be a problem.
Okay, so that's a great question. So let me answer it more generally. There are no containers at WIP that are unvented. There is a requirement.
There is no containers that are unvented. So it's vented on the highway the whole way there, and then it's repackaged when it gets there. And so your community is being, all along the way, are being hammered with radiation. You get it? So they got 13,439 shipments from 22 facilities. And all of them are vented on the highway the whole way there, because they're like, it's a really strange question. It's not a random question, rather. Don't be alarmed. Be very, very alarmed. The FBI Houston to conduct a large-scale nuclear incident training in southeast Houston, Texas, Harris County next week. You'll see a large number of FBI agents, police, militaries, and helicopters, but don't be alarmed. Don't be specific on the training exercises, exact locations. They can pop up anywhere. So just get out of the way, because they're better than you. Residents should also be aware there will be police, military vehicles, aircrafts all around Houston, along with groups of training participants gathered at locations. Yeah, there'll be some serious conspiracies coming out of there. The mind of Oppenheimer, inventor of the nuclear bomb who turned pacifist. I've been listening in particular to Oppenheimer for the last couple of weeks, every night or every second night. And in the mornings, I'll listen to at least 2 of his lectures each morning. And they wrecked him to get the power away from him and give it to the military-industrial complex. They attacked him relentlessly, didn't they? Core Power breaches funding milestone of $100 million. They want to make nuclear disease factories for ships. Literally, like, you're playing with stupid whenever you start talking the ocean. Why would you do that? Just because you can, that doesn't mean it's acceptable. Plan to release nuclear fuel pool water into the Hudson River delayed, which is the Indian Point nuclear disaster factory. And they released about 120,000 liters of each of the pools. There's 2 pools at the top of each reactor building. Each of them released about 120,000 liters, and each liter is saturated with anthropogenic man-made isotopes each day for 60 years. And the water that's left over, now that they moved the fuel out of the pool into the dry cask, is vicious saturated water, but that's what it's always been. And so they got everybody thinking about this instead of what happened for 60 years. Quite the trick, isn't it? The 3 pillars of our energy future could be wind, solar, and nuclear. Wind, solar, and nuclear. Nuclear is not supposed to be in that equation, but they're changing laws everywhere to call nuclear clean. And then they're getting rid of renewables and calling it clean. And that way, it somehow magically now is the preferred. But they're not building a America's got 4 gigawatts coming online in the far, far future. Right, there's no renaissance. Canada's looking at maybe a gigawatt in their fantasy of small modular reactors in the next couple of decades. So there is no nuclear renaissance, but they're playing a dangerous game by pretending there is. And they're trying to quantify keeping the existing disease factories working, and they're all surrounded by farms. 125 billion contingencies for Australian nuclear subs. So 123 billion, rather, is unaccountable. They don't have to explain where it went. Out of the original 368 billion, which is twice as much as you need to buy geothermal for the entire country of Australia. Right? Problem solved forever. No, we're going to spend it on 8 stupid nuclear subs that are pointless. No, let's not spend it on the country and come up with solutions. Let's spend it on the stupidest thing imaginable, nuclear subs. The military wrecks your own country, let alone everybody else's. They don't care. That's what they do for a living. They wreck countries, and yours is fine too. It's absurd. No strings attached public funding allocated to the military. No strings attached public funding. They don't have to tell you anything. Intergenerational impact of the Australians. Hundreds of billions in cost to be skewed for future budgets, forcing deep cuts to public spending for decades. Or it'll be longer than decades. Bunch of corporate people shaking hands to steal everybody's future so that they can have a paycheck and go playing golf when they retire. Maybe we can store the nuclear waste at the Saskatchewan, Canada legislator building. So that's a great idea. Let's just put the legislators' meetings at the nuclear waste sites. That'll put an end to all of it. The reader points out means to suppose the nuclear waste remains elusive and that Canada continues to store the most per capita. Canada is producing the most nuclear waste per capita. Really? I know one thing they can do, reactors are brutal disease factories. To walk against nuclear waste, God bless these people, man, that do that. Such a hard thing to do, to go and dog it out, beat a dog and get attacked and vilified and demonized. I never get used to it. I'll never get used to it, I'm sure of it. It's a struggle, right? Anybody who chooses this path, and I'm not always going to be perfect, right? I'm not always going to get my message across. I'm cynical, and so a lot of people, it's hard on them, right? And it's not intentional. That's what the industry does to you. And because I'm at this 24 hours a day, it's normal to me, but it's not normal to other people. So other people get offended pretty easily, and you don't even realize it. You don't know it. You're not intending it, but it happens all the time. And because I'm used to it, it's different, right? To me, I don't see it the way other people see it. I'm at it all the time. I read it all day. I do it, for so many years that I live in a cesspool. That's my life. I live in a great big stupid cesspool all day, every day. And I'm frustrated, and I'm still in that panic mode where you're trying to save the planet and get humanity to go, do the moral and ethical thing. And it's ludicrous to think that way, it really is. But that's the kind of personality it takes to succeed, unfortunately. And then the enormous amount of censorship put against people like me, the other day I was trying to break my concentration, and I was on YouTube, and I was coming all of these YouTubers, young and old, and they got hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and they do these little videos, useless videos. They're actual garbage, right? And you see them driving Lamborghinis, living in great big beautiful houses, and just absurd bags of money everywhere. And I'm not kidding you, it's just, they live this fantasy lifestyle, they go on amazing vacations, extremely self-centered, unbelievable greedy. And all I can think about was, if I had that opportunity, I could wreck the nuclear industry. I could wreck it in no time at all. I don't know how to be like them. I found it so frustrating that people like that actually exist. But that was based, the majority of YouTube, that's what it was, right? They single out people with drive that were extremely self-centered and put them on a pedestal. And you can give them, they make tons of money so they can hire the videographers, they can hire the editors, they can hire, and they still can't come out with decent videos, right? They still can't change the fact that their lives are pointless. But they're great distractions. You see this, just millions of people commenting and worshiping them, and I'm just shocked. And I promised myself I won't do it anymore because it's disturbing that I'm up against that world. How do you compete against that kind of self-gloating, Israel powerful warplanes that keep making deadly history. Israel attacked blew up a lot of nuclear plants, right? The Syria nuclear reactor in 2007. They destroyed the Iraqi's nuclear reactor. And they got all the weapons Israel would need to penetrate Iran's nuclear reactors. It's just something. It's really something. India joins the elite club of nations with successful sea-based ballistic missile defense tests. So this is one of their newest versions of ballistic missiles, nuclear-driven or nuclear-tipped. Wow, wow, wow. Country can't eat nuclear weapons. They're starving to death by the million. There's over 1 million starved to death each year, but it's all good. They got nuclear ballistic missiles, Dana. That'll solve starvation. U.S. visit will be historic and significant. This was a Philippine president visiting the White House in Washington. Engaged in nuclear and talking about new scale small modular reactors sold to the Filipinos. They're trying to sell it to them at the White House, which has one of the lowest carbon footprints. Nuclear energy is the biggest, most labor and resource commodity intensive industry in history. Sizewell C, which they're building right now in the United Kingdom, is the biggest project in history, construction project. You got enough cement to build a sidewalk from Britain to Rome. Oh, and only the best sidewalk material too, by the way. And it's claiming no harmful emissions during, and they do that, we see this last 3 years or something. That's always put in there. It's like a tattoo in many ways, where they'll always have that in there. Singapore hangs a prisoner over 1 kilogram of cannabis. What a disgusting country. What a revolting country. Holy shit, eh? Oh, Senator the Honorable Penny Wong done a radio interview with Ben Fordham. She put it up at her site. Just before we went live, I picked up that one. I was like, why not? I could do it tomorrow night, but then I got to do it tomorrow night. So if I do it tonight, then, I got to do it tomorrow night, right? You know what I mean? You mean what I know? So this is about posturing. Well, China, we know they are a traditional trading partner. We also have this other issue going on with our nuclear submarines. Well, you don't got none, Penny, sorry. No offense. They hate our deal with the UK and US. Because she's trying to foment support, right, by doing this. But you got to try and get the balance, right, because we make no apologies for the need for nuclear submarines. China curb stomp Australia into the dirt in about 20 seconds. Not Australia. 8 submarines ain't going to stop it or change it, period. China's keeping a close eye on the U.S. because they're not keen on a nuclear submarine deal. So she's trying to build, through reverse psychology, build support for bankrupting the country instead of the money they're spending on the submarines is twice. They can build twice the energy they need for the entire country that they currently use, rather, in geothermal. And they can build it right away too. Everything's available, and they have huge mineral resources. The Mineral Council, unfortunately, is vicious. They're vicious crazies. They're vicious crazies. What a long day this was. I'm exhausted, my goodness. It's okay, I'll get some sleep. We'll do it again tomorrow night, right? I hope. What's tonight? What time is it? What year is this? That's a little bit early, is it? Well, how's our poll, first off? Let's see what we got going on over here. Oh, yeah, that's right. Should UK apologize for nuking Australia and all of its wildlife, all its insects and birds and animals and mammals and the food, the trees, the waters, the plants, the communities, the playgrounds, the schools, the land, the air, the islands, and the future? Yeah, of course you should. Britain's crazy, right? And they just sent a whole bunch of dirty bombs, aka depleted uranium, to the Ukraine, so they can blast depleted uranium all over their own country. The Americans are doing the same. Port Angeles is gonna go for the snooze fest. Well, guess what? I am too. You're not the only one. Good night. So long. Farewell. We'll meet again. 24 hours. How did we get pounded tonight? Pretty bad. Yeah, pretty bad. We got a poll for the last count of the poll. Should UK apologize for nuking Australia, all its wildlife, the food, the water, the land, the air, the insects, the future? We got a miserable 36 likes. A lousy 35 votes. We got less votes than likes. What's that all about? Last night we had twice as many likes as votes. Or twice as many votes as likes. We got censored again brutally tonight. Everybody take Wednesday off. That's something I don't know about going on. I'm doing my share of work anyway. Doing the best I can do. That's all I can do. Dana Nasana, moderating. Thank you again. Night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. See everybody. United Kingdom. I'll see everybody on the other side. Get ready to close her down. What day is this anyway? This is Wednesday, right? Yeah, Wednesday. See everybody tomorrow night. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. A great day tomorrow. Hugs for you and your loved ones. Hope you have a great night and a great day. We'll see everybody on the other side.